Hi, friends. Welcome to this week's American Mussar Community Gathering. We are moving on to the soul trait of patience this week. And in part of our time, we'll be talking about how patience interacts with chesed, this trait of loving kindness that we've been focusing on, supporting others without expecting anything in return. We'll start the way we always do with a short meditation. So I invite you to close your eyes and relax in your seat. Take in a deep breath through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. As you go at your own pace of inhaling through the nose and holding, and exhaling through the mouth and holding. If thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them go. Now is not the time for solving problems. All you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Joanne, welcome. Well, to get started, a kind of beginning question is a really simple one. How did humility or chesed show up for you in the last week? Was there a practice you tried? I know not all of you have been here the last couple of weeks, so you could talk about maybe a moment of mindfulness that showed up for you, or some way that your Mussar practice kind of came into play. So, yeah,
Thank you.
would like to start? Joanne, yes, please.
Wait, let me see if no, I'm not, okay, you did. Okay, so, I went to a meeting. I'm trying to remember, it was last night. It was a long meeting from 8 to 10, um, of the bylaws committee for the board of directors of my synagogue. But before that happened, from the previous meeting, from the July meeting, actually, um, we knew that we had to meet. And then I was getting anxious. So this works into patience also, I guess, because I didn't, you know, I asked the board president about this group meeting, and he said, "Oh, well, this guy David is the chairman." So went over to David. He said, "I never heard I was chairman." So I said, "Oh, all right. Well," so I guess the following week I sent an email to everyone that I remembered was on this committee. So then we get to that, he said, or he emailed me back and he said, "No, I'm the chairman of the committee."
Hmm.
So, okay. So when I saw him in person, I said, and this is someone I've had a lot of problems with because he's very arrogant. He, uh, he can be very nasty, make fun of people and stuff like that. But anyway, though he's mellowed a bit with age, uh, a bit. Um, so I said, or he asked me, I forget if he came to me and said, why did you send an email to everyone? I'm the chairman. And I said, oh, so I said, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that you really were the chairman. And he started walking away. He didn't hear me, whatever. So I went over to the table where he was sitting and I said, excuse me, I was talking to you when you started to walk away. And I just want to say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on your toes. I just got anxious that we meet and I
Hmm.
didn't know you were chairman. So that was fine. So, um, yeah, that was fine. No curse words and no, no hard feelings.
Sounded like to me the moment of humility for you was kind of occupying your space and setting a
Right.
boundary. Hey, you walked away in the middle of me talking to you.
Yeah, well, that too, because that's very rude.
It is, and
It is.
you sort of set a
Just because I'm not the chairman or the head of the board or the president of the show or whatever, I am the sisterhood president and I'm a human being. So,
yeah,
but some people, they're the center of their world. And so, yeah, so I went after him because, you don't just walk away while I'm talking.
yeah. No, that's very rude.
Yeah.
So
So,
thank
so
you.
I went over and said, you know, you were walking with, oh, I didn't realize. Okay. So I repeated what I was saying. That's
Great. Hi, Marianne. Welcome. We're sharing how our Mussar journey showed up, whether it was chesed or humility or in some other way in the last week. So, would anyone else care to share something? Yeah, Christo.
So one of the biggest things with Musar is keeping a journal. So I just recently started another one.
Mhm.
The one phrase that kept going through my mind, I made sure I wrote it down on one of the first pages. I wrote in English the two words listen and silent are spelled with all the same letters for a good reason.
Mm.
uh,
And then below that, another note, rather than talking to or at someone, try to talk with the person.
Mm. Love that. Well, that reminds me of my Shema rock. This is Shema in Hebrew. I got this at the Jewish National Museum in Israel and had like these different words. And I was like, oh, of course, you all know that that's like, one of my favorite meditations. And it's really, really a very important thing. And I love that kind of listen and silence connection to Christo. That's awesome.
it's true.
Others. I'm trying to think like what I've been journaling quite a bit, and there's a few, I'm in this new period of transition of getting going on like rabbi stuff, and today was like the first meeting that I attended of the kind of Association of Northern California Rabbis, so the Board of Rabbis, basically for the area, which I recently joined. There was a great teaching, and I was like, okay. And the person said something, and I said something kind of provocative, and the host of the meeting kind of gave an answer that was a little bit defensive, even though they weren't addressed in this, but they felt they needed to address mine. So I went up to her after the meeting and I just said, hey, I want to apologize for the way that I made my point, and I could have used a different example because I'm realizing that the example that I used could have been taken as a rebuke of the way like the committee was set up or something, and it was not my intention, and I should have used a different example. And it's like, yeah, I realized I was kind of defensive, but people don't understand, how hard we work and things don't, you invite people, but if they don't come, there's nothing you can do about it. I said, oh, I totally get it. I should have used a different example. And that was, I didn't have to say anything, and I know this person and it would have been fine, but I felt it important to kind of think about, I chose to use a provocative example and I didn't need to, but it was fine. But that was kind of the small way that it kind of showed up for me today. Anyone else care to share something, or we can kind of dig in, go on to our next thing. Okay, well, I hope you keep power and I hope everyone is safe there, Carrie, with the thunderstorms. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the share, assuming I can find the button, which I just did. Okay, so let's can I have a volunteer to unmute and kind of read these first two bullets?
I'll read. What is patience? Patience is about enduring suffering, bearing the burden when there are no other options. From the Hebrew savlanut,
Yes.
not in the Torah. Silvot means to bend down and carry a burden. God tells Moses he will deliver them from Silvot in Egypt.
Right. Thank you. So I will stop the share. I'll also just put these. So these are a couple definitions of patience. It's always good for us to remind ourselves about what we're talking about. And in English, we might have other associations that come up first in English. What are some of the things that are surprising about this to you? What do you see? What don't you see in this definition that you might have expected to see? Yeah, Bonnie.
Yeah, I'm really uncomfortable with this definition. I feel like it came from a different generation. I don't think patience is about enduring suffering. I think patience, for me, is behaving in a more appropriate way. For me, I don't see it bearing the burden when there are no other options. There are plenty of other options. You don't have to be patient with someone. I think that's a choice, but I don't see it as enduring suffering. I don't know I'm sorry, where did that definition come from?
Well, it's kind of synthesizing a number of Mussar things. Maybe it can be suffering with a small s, like for example, you are stuck in traffic. There is no way off the freeway. That's kind of a no other option. And so you can get really annoyed and irritated and throw gas on the fire, or you can practice patience. And so in that sense, it's enduring the discomfort of being stuck in traffic without kind of making it things even worse for yourself.
Well, unless you have an emergency and you have to be somewhere, life happens.
Yeah.
I just don't see it as suffering. Suffering to me is something very different.
Okay. Thank you. Joanne. You're still on mute.
I was just going to agree with Bonnie that I was surprised that it said suffering, because I think you know, it's not like the worst thing in the world to have to wait in a line or wait in traffic. I mean, it's an annoyance, maybe inconvenience. But I guess I don't think of that as suffering unless you know, it's causing you some physical pain for some reason, or mental pain. And I guess that is something, I guess, that we would need to overcome. If something tries your patience, and I guess that is something we need to work on. I have a neighbor, she is very kindly driving me to the supermarket and to the community garden because I don't have a car right now. And she is so cautious with her driving and so patient. She always lets the other cars in. And sometimes, she'll remark because people, are not very accommodating to let other people merge and things like that. But so I guess there is a sense of suffering about that, again, like other people's rudeness. But I feel like we can work on being more patient, I guess, and not getting so annoyed and things.
Yeah, so it sounds like, thank you. There's a couple of examples there, but it sounds like what I'm hearing from Bonnie and to you to some degree is that suffering feels like too strong a word for what it is, an inconvenience, a discomfort, a situation. Martin and then Nancy and then Carrie.
Yeah, I agree with Bonnie. Suffering and patience, two different things in today's world. Yeah. Yeah, and I also agree with what Bonnie said about patience just requires you to act appropriately. And by example of what's true suffering is, I just saw a report from this young former father in Gaza. His 3-day-old babies were killed by Israeli bombs, and then his wife was also killed 3 days after birth, and that's suffering. And to ask him to be patient, completely different situation. That's my comment.
Yeah, no, that's a terrible situation. Thank you, Martin. Nancy.
Yes, I'm in the agreement club. I feel when I heard that burden and suffering, it almost takes it to the negative extreme. And I don't see patience as being a part of that at all. For me, patience is allowing time to be at the moment, for me to shift my self-perception. When I shift my perception, it's no longer it just opens up all kinds of possibilities. And so what I heard and read was more negative, and that patience is more positive and opens up a lightness in my being to see what's possible.
Thank you. So this word suffering is also taking you down a negative road. Carrie.
I remember that in past Mussar sessions, when we talked about patience, this very same subject came up each time. People did not like the word suffering. I just looked up, besides something else I want to say, I looked up the definition, the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. And I think that we have to redefine what the word suffering is. It was totally different back when in biblical times, and it was there was a lot of suffering. So I think, at least for me, sometimes it is very suffering to be patient in certain situations. I hate it, but I do it anyway. And I just think we need to think about what the word suffering means now and what it meant then. And this is also situational. It's not every time you're patient, you're suffering. There's
thank you.
many.
And every time you're suffering, it's not, patience isn't necessarily called for. let's hear from Martin, and then I have a few examples. And I will say it's really funny. I have no memory of people objecting to suffering, and so clearly I have not done my listening or not gotten the message that at least to have a more encompassing definition like the one you read, Carrie, would have been perhaps an appropriate response to the feedback. Martin.
Yeah, the definition that we just read, when was that written? I mean, is that 6,000 years old, or is that? Oh,
The one that I put up?
yeah, yeah.
No, it's from the Mussar literature, and I probably wrote that definition synthesizing different things I read in the Mussar literature.
Okay, so it's not a really biblical definition of patience and suffering.
Yeah, but there is this root, saval, to bear a burden. But no, patience isn't like suffering for suffering's sake. Like, let me give you a couple of examples. And I've totally heard what you said, and it is, but one is once when one of my daughters was a teenager, and she was really upset and angry and crying about something. And I would really fly off the handle when she would do this. But I stood there and just listened and didn't say anything. And I was absolutely miserable the whole time. And I was like, okay, I just need to practice patience and I need to endure this unpleasant situation. Now, I don't want to equate what I was feeling with the horrible type of grief that we've kind of talked about, but nonetheless, I was suffering. It was really unpleasant. I would have felt better walking away, yelling, doing whatever. So some people may disagree whether that was suffering or not, but it sure was unpleasant. So second thing is I have a very dear friend who has a horrible neurological kidney disease where she's in excruciating pain and has been for 6 months, like an 11 on a scale of 10. Medication is not working. And sometimes, and that truly is suffering. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And so I would never say to her, well, this is a good opportunity for you to practice patience. But from an academic standpoint, I've heard from people who've been in those situations and have studied Mussar. They said that they have found practicing patience is like the only thing that kind of helped them get through and kind of keep their hope that things would change. So those are counterexamples. I totally hear you. I wrote a note on the slide to kind of add some more nuance into the definition. And we don't all have to agree at all on this. So, Bonnie,
Yeah.
I saw your hand. Did you decide not to?
No, I had a thought at the beginning and I didn't share it. When I think of suffering and enduring, I think of my dad's parents who came from Kiev in right at the turn of the century in third class on a 6 or 8 week trip from Europe to New York. That in my mind, having done a 5 day where the porthole was, we were below the porthole and we could see the fish swimming by when I went to Europe my first time when I was in college. That to me is enduring and suffering.
Yeah.
No amount of patience would have changed that trip.
Right, exactly. They could have practiced. I mean, if you're calm, you don't need patience. Patience is different than being calm. If you're calm or feeling okay, you don't need patience. That's not being patient. That's being calm. That's a different thing. But yeah, that sounds like an awful trip that they must have taken.
And many of us have grandparents who took that trip.
Absolutely.
I think they would have laughed if we had used the word patience.
But I'll be honest, I'm not understanding your point. I don't understand why you think like patience is something they could have help them get through that time according to this definition. And you may not agree with the definition, but it's saying, okay, I need to just get through this. You know, this too shall, like the mantra, this too shall pass, and I have the strength to get by until it does. It's like, okay, I just have to get through these 6 weeks. Man, these are really going to be unpleasant.
I don't think when you're in the middle of something like that, you can think that way.
Yeah, perhaps not. Carrie.
The several times I've been through pretty nasty treatments, chemotherapy stuff for cancer and for hepatitis. And I did practice patience. I was suffering physically, and I knew that this would, well, I was hoping anyway that this would cure me. Eventually it did, but there was one time I was in treatment and my skin broke out like leprosy. And that was one of the bad side effects. And my doctor wanted to stop it. And I said, and my dermatologist said, no, you can keep doing this. And he said, no, this is too life-threatening. So I was willing to be patient and endure that, but he stopped it. And eventually there was a treatment that did work, and it wasn't that painful, but most of them were the side effects were really, really bad. And this took 6, 7 years, something like that, to get it rid of it. So it was like a roller coaster. One treatment wouldn't work, I'd have to take a break. Another treatment wouldn't work, take a break. And finally, the third and last time worked. So it was, I was patient. I knew that eventually I would get rid of this stuff. I just had that faith. And I think that is patience with suffering, to me. And I don't know if other people see it that way, but.
Thank you, Carrie. You're listening with an open heart. Thank you for sharing that. I'm putting in the chat like the third bullet, which isn't exactly what you're talking about, but this is sort of a definition that takes into account time perception. And like, if we want more now, if we want now to be different than what it is, that causes stress. But if we're waiting too long, then that could lead to unhappiness. Or in your case, you know, it could have been life-threatening, you know, or the doctor said, no, this is not a time to endure. This is a time to let your body recover because it's too dangerous. So that's a piece of the puzzle as well. It's kind of a discontinuity between what is. Yeah, Marianne.
I don't understand that. Patience is about time perception, wanting more. You mean wanting more patience? Is that what you mean?
No, not wanting more patience. Yeah, this isn't like written all that well.
Wanting
Wanting
more
like
what?
more, wanting something different than what is today. Like wanting more, wanting traffic to go faster, wanting, you know, this hour to be up, you know, wanting, you know, Hanukkah to be here already, you know, whatever the case. That isn't going to make things move any faster. So that can just make you stressed out and unhappy. But if you're just kind of waiting too long for something which maybe doesn't have a fixed end date, like in the case of Carrie's treatment, or in the case of a relationship, or in the case of, you know, I'm not going to read any books until the sequel to my book comes out. I'm just going to wait. Well, that could be really unhappy if you don't read any other books. It's like, great, you have the loyalty and the patience to kind of wait for this new book, but I know this is a dumb example, but it doesn't actually, it's not actually helpful. Is that more clear, Marianne? So, okay. Okay. Well, let's take a look at the spectrum of patients. Let's see if maybe this is a little more helpful. So the mantra I suggest is this too shall pass, and I have the strength to get by until it does. So the idea that, you know, yeah. And then if we have too little patience, we end up angry and frustrated. And if we have too much patience, we can be kind of inactive and fatalistic. And so it's this kind of sweet spot between, you know, being active and inactive. It's not like next week we're going to be looking at, or in our next soul trait, we'll be looking at enthusiasm, which is about taking action. But this is about the waiting piece, or maybe I can't even take any action because, you know, I'm stuck in traffic. So how does this clarify or unclarify or add to kind of our discussion of patience? Barry, were you raising your hand, or were you just moving your hand?
Both. I was thinking and using my hands to think. But what I thought of immediately when you put that up was how I my youngest daughter is very emotional and temperamental. And she's got two young kids and she's under a lot of stress. And sometimes our relationship is very adult, one-on-one. And other times it's like she's a teenager again.
Mm.
And I think I exercise a hell of a lot of patience with her and waiting for her. I'm not, she doesn't allow me to help her talk through it. I'm not that person. She has other people for that. And so I just have to be patient. And it hurts sometimes to have to put up with this. I'm not going to yell at her or say you're acting like a kid again, because that'll just make it worse. So I just, you know, okay, here we go.
Mm.
Let's hope this phase doesn't last that long, that kind of thing. And then when she's back to being an adult with me, it's wonderful. So that's what I was thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, or we can start to head into, we could start to head towards the breakout rooms. Okay, so okay.
Sorry,
So,
Jessica.
so we've talked about Chesed is supporting another person without expecting anything in return. Patience is about bearing the burden of something uncomfortable. Okay, so I used uncomfortable here, so that's good. So how do they interact? And the question I'm wondering is, you know, should we ever wait before practicing Hesed? You know, do we just want to jump in? You know, we want to help. It's the time for action. Is there ever a time where patience is called for? So that's, we'll see what the wisdom of the community brings us. And we'll do some thinking on this as well. There we have it in the chat. And I will start the breakout rooms. Okay, the rooms are open.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So how are those discussions, Martin? I see you are ready to go. Yes. Please remember to unmute.
We had a pretty robust conversation. And it includes our unanimous comment that we think we have another request for a redefinition of what you added to it. And it was the word fatalistic. That we thought it was too draconian of a position to think that we might be in if we are too patient. That was one of our comments that we okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, it could be fatalistic for sure. Joanne.
Yeah, well, I was talking about how with my late sister, it was so difficult to keep my patience and not set her off, and and uh, and it was kind of a burden and suffering because it's like I couldn't. It was like walking on eggshells with her. And the only time I was successful was when I turned it around and said, "Well, what?" Because she would get more and more depressed the longer the conversation would go on, and there was nothing I could suggest or say or anything. Just more and more. No, that doesn't work. I'm going to just kill myself and hang up the phone. And she did this to me and my mother many times. Never tried to kill herself. But one time, and after having more of these experiences, I said, well, what would you do that would make you feel better? And she came up with something. Hallelujah. She said that maybe if I take a bubble bath. I said, great, why don't you go do that? So she didn't hang up for once. But that's when it can be suffering. And so we were also saying, what's a situation where you can't offer chesed so much, and it's like when the other person can't accept it, maybe, it's like they can't take it in, or they reject you personally, or something like that, or they just don't want to say that they're disabled and they can't do it. Okay.
Yeah, so thank you, Joanne. And what I'm hearing in terms of the chesed thing is, or maybe reading into it or expanding it, is that as I'm percolating on it, is like, I want to do something. I want to help. I want to fix it. And the other person's like, no, there's nothing you can do, and I don't want your solutions, or I'm not ready to accept it. And so that's where we have to live with the discomfort of, geez, I really wish I could do something, but they don't want me to do anything. So, okay, that's their choice. Did I understand that right, Joanne? Yeah, thank you. Marianne.
My partner and I talked about listening and really listening. If I understood, I think this is what we talked about, and as a form of hesed, because if you really, really listen to someone, you're really taking them in and accepting everything. So that was great. And my partner also reminded me that we don't know what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, which I think hopefully will help me to be more patient. So thank you.
So the patient's piece is holding back from talking and just listening. Did I understand that correctly?
Well, I guess you could say that is, we were talking it more in terms of chesed, is just listening and taking somebody in. But yeah, I guess it does involve patience. Like you're not going to jump in there with what you want to say, you know.
Yeah. Great, thank you. other people have anything you'd like to share from the discussion? Well, you may have noticed at one point I kind of popped in like a quick quote from the Talmud, which I came across when I was doing a little thinking about this. And so
What?
so what it says is the ways of those who do acts of chesed is to run after the poor. So you may remember that like clothing the naked, that's like one of the classic examples of chesed, comforting widows and orphans, taking care of the poor. So is this, so what does that mean? Is that always an okay thing to do? It's saying, don't be patient, run after the poor. What is that even talking about? I see you sort of making some faces, Sarah. You're percolating on that, I could tell.
Yeah, I don't know if I understand that, but I was thinking about in our group, we talked about being patient and suffering, doing both. That sometimes you have to be patient. You could be suffering, but you have to have patience because you know that it's kind of a means to an end.
Thank you. So Marianne and then Carrie.
To me, I really like that quote because I kind of think that's in a way what we're here to do. And it could be poor in spirit, it could be poor in financial means, it can poor in many ways. And it's being proactive. It's not me just sitting in my comfortable suburban home, but it's me being proactive and saying, how can I serve my community? So I think it's a wonderful quote.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well said. Carrie.
I second that, and what I thought about was that we can offer services, we can do all kinds of things for people in need, but we have to realize that some people will not accept it. And so we have to offer it in a way that preserves their dignity and not get upset if they don't want to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Preserving their dignity is really critical. And there's a certain, like if we take that teaching to an extreme, it's like that could be embarrassing for somebody. They're like chasing after. Say, hey, notice the hole in your pants, and here's a Target gift card for you. And like, well, maybe
Well, I
that's
took the chasing after somebody's more of a meta, not
absolutely,
literally.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it is a metaphor, but I think what Carrie was talking about was a piece of it also, which is being attentive and to kind of to what others had brought up earlier, being attentive to kind of what they want and what they need. And, there is a teaching about grief, which is don't comfort a mourner before they're dead, while they're dead lie before them. In other words, don't comfort someone before the burial. And that took me a while to think about, but I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I remember before my mom was buried, I was just in a state of shock. And I was, and then once the burial was done, I just felt a lot of relief and I was in a much better place to be comforted. Whereas I didn't want to be comforted, I wanted her to be alive, I wanted her to be buried, So that would be another time when patience is sort of like, okay, my need to comfort you isn't anything compared to what your needs as a mourner are. Let's see, we got a couple minutes left, so we have time for a few more. Carrie, is your hand up from before, or is that new? Okay. Let's take a look at some of the patient's actions that we can take a look at. May I have a volunteer to read these? And I haven't fine-tuned these kind of for our Chesed practice. So these are just the ones from the chapter.
Okay.
I can
Mine,
read.
well, I was going to start, but
Right.
Go
why don't
ahead,
you
Joanne.
start, and then you can split it. So why don't you do the first part?
okay, mantra, this too shall pass, and I have the strength to get by until it does. Next. No? Okay. Action steps. Remind yourself that it is okay to be patient because this too shall pass. Focus on staying present with your feelings. Give thanks for the opportunity to practice patience when you find yourself becoming impatient. Meditate on the mental image of a patient person. Look for the divine spark in others. Speak more or less. Meditate, sing. From the Spiritual Practice of Good Actions, page 75, 76.
Thank you, Joanne.
Sure.
So take just a moment and look at these and think about your week ahead. And think of one area of your life where your patience is out of balance or your chesed is out of balance. And what's an action step that you could take? And it doesn't need to, these are just some ideas to help spark your own situation. If you'd like to share in the chat or to just quickly unmute, and you don't need to do this, but if anyone would like to share what they might do, Carrie.
I wrestle with this a lot because I would like to get into the studio every day, and I can't because life happens. So I'm have to be very patient with myself and with life, and not get upset when I can't get in, and also realize that I need to, when I'm estimating how long something's going to take, I have to multiply it by 300 so that I can, be realistic. But that is an ongoing thing for me, to be patient with the process of creating and the process of life, and they don't always cooperate.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, well, friends, it's time for our closing meditation. So please relax and close your eyes. Take in a nice leisurely breath through the nose. A nice leisurely exhale. Breathe on your own. And just imagine yourself in that situation. And see yourself taking that action. Maybe it's taking a breath. Maybe it's staying mindful of what is, not wishing for things to be different. Maybe it's deciding you've waited too long for things to be different, and it's some action you're going to take. Just see yourself taking that action. One small step. And imagine a feeling of satisfaction having taken that step. And allow the images to pass. And we'll take a moment of gratitude for this hour spent together with other souls sharing our journey. When you're ready, you may open your eyes.